Greetings, faithful viewer. As you may recall, we last discussed the time when all the planets magically aligned to deliver not one, not two, but three threequels in the month of May of 2007. Shrek 3, Spider-Man 3, and Pirates of the Caribbean 3. A trilogy of trilogies, epic conclusions filled with baby ogres and women beating. While these three trilogies were considered colossal disappointments, it was hard to still not be swept away even if the magic was lost a bit. Like, why yes, I would love to be a big green hulking ogre man with funny ears, a boisterous drunkard pirate sailing the seven seas, and yes, I want to be him. On the go. Thankfully, all three of the movies had huge marketing campaigns. Did you see that? See? They were marketed together. I always knew. That's right. These movies got video game tie-ins at a very opportune time as well, a transitionary period between the 6th gen and 7th gen consoles. So as a result, Shrek 3, Spider-Man 3, and Outworld's End got a slew of ports, and on the handheld front, all saw a PSP and DS version. But get this, Shrek and Spidey even got Game Boy Advance renditions in 2007, pretty damn late releases. I didn't know anybody still buying new Game Boy Advance games in 2007, but I guess the market was still there. Like, did you know Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix got a GBA port? Look at this. It hurts my brain. This shouldn't exist. Shrek! By Shrek the Third, there had already been a decent amount of Shrek games released, and if we look at our trilogy, Shrek 1, the game, was this bizarre movie tie-in that had nothing to do with the film. It's like they gave developers a picture of Shrek and just was like, hey, game, make game. In contrast, Shrek 2 was a pretty big release for a movie game from what I recall at least. I don't remember much about the actual gameplay, but the cover is just etched into my mind of Shrek peeking over that orange background. This is perhaps the most 2004 looking thing my mind can think of. Were they trying to mimic Halo 2 with this cover? And then you have Shrek the Third, which just kind of ruins the whole color scheme they had going on. Bastard. Shrek the Third on PSP is pretty much a faithful port of the console versions, and like those, it's your standard beat-em-up game. You've played this before. Just walking room to room, bulldozing enemies with very simple button combos, and occasionally hulking the fuck out with your special moves. Shrek is basically green Kratos, and he can smash enemies until they're nothing but paste, indiscernible from the green goop served with the limited edition Shrek 2 Kid Cuisine. Oh my god, Shrek, no, you can't do that after the Shrek the Third trimester. The whole game is a decent retelling of the movie, and everything is presented with this theatrical theme behind it. As you may know, Shrek the Third isn't exactly the best movie, and it also doesn't have many locations, so this game really has to stretch for content, like this random snow level thrown smack dab in the middle where you play as everyone's favorite character, Artie. To make the mind-numbing, repetitive gameplay go down a tad smoother, you do get to play as other characters like Puss in Boots and Donkey, and even later Sleeping Beauty.
Oh, she's such a babe. Yes, I know she's way off this sleep. Hey, you!
I can't believe you say that, right in front of me.
Good job, nice job, Barry, well done. Now she's gonna cry.
For the most part, these characters play nearly exactly the same, obviously with just different animations, and the only real novelty of using these different characters is getting to see their special moves, like Puss doing his signature cute eyes of death, and Donkey, like, jumps at people. Though sometimes we'll have little gimmicks like Sleeping Beauty can float in midair like Peach and Smash Brothers, but it hardly comes into play. There's an in-game shop where you can use your collected points to buy costumes and light upgrades, but you'll hardly need them. The best part about this game is buying the in-game commentary tracks, like this one with the 3 little pigs.
Is that my soda? What soda? I don't know what you're talking about. Pay attention, they're on! I got up at 4 a.m. to come down here to do this. Like we didn't all come together here.
Other than the occasional gag like that, it's a largely forgettable game. If you really love Shrek, I can see it being decent for a few hours. It's very short, not much longer than the actual movie. Even though it's not the most impressive game in the world, I do think it's cool that this PSP version was able to mimic the console experience. Now, the DS version is a different beast entirely. Instead, it's a 2.5D side-scroller, and it's definitely an early DS game. Because all your attacks are tied to the touchscreen, so get ready to do a lot of scribbling. Or clicking, if you're using an emulator.
We know who you are, and we're gonna find you!
Here you control Shrek, Puss in Boots, and Artie, all on the same level. Shrek is the Hulk of the group. He can barge through objects, while Artie, this little shit, is the Steve Rogers. He can throw a shield as a projectile. And Puss in Boots is the cat from Captain Marvel. He can leap and perform wall jumps. Rather than separating these characters in different levels like the PSP version, you play as all three, using the touchscreen to select your character. It's interesting because in order to finish a level, all three need to make it to the end, and most of the time you need all three to solve puzzles and get through the stage, yet you can only control one at a time. It's definitely more unique than your standard repetitive brawler, like in this one part where you encounter this giant troll. Puss in Boots can safely jump over him, while Artie uses his shield to whack its head, and Big Daddy Shrek bludgeons his head with those meaty green hands. It's definitely more interesting than the beat-em-up levels from the PSP version, but it's so slow. Just having to go back and walk each character through every section is so boring. You can chain them together so they all move as one, but your attacks become limited to a single character, and inevitably, you'll have to separate all three again. What sucks is sometimes the characters will detach without notice, so while I had to wait for the slow-ass elevator, get these two on here, and then go back for Artie, I honestly couldn't stomach this game for too long. My brain was starting to turn into limited edition Shrek 2 Cake Cuisine
Swamp pudding inside.
Uh-oh, Skipper. I seem to be marooned on some sort of forgotten Game Boy Advance hellscape. This is likely my final transmission. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Ow! Ow!
Yep, that is certainly Shrek the Third on a Game Boy Advance. Oh wait, hold on, the screen's not accurate to that hardware model. There we go, much better. I would really like to know who owned this. There's something very surreal, nightmarish, yet charming about seeing a 2007 movie adapted into a Game Boy Advance game. It operates kind of similar to the DS version, but you're controlling two characters through a level one by one, but here, this just feels kind of pointless. Like the levels will veer off with one character before you join them up again, but for the most part, it didn't really add anything to the overall experience. It's just still much slower to play. Like graphically, I do think it's decent. I look at these sprites and this platforming and the character switching, and my mind immediately jumps to Donkey Kong Country and how fluid and nice that one felt and how you could switch characters on a whim. It's weird in this GBA version you can't chain characters together. You always have to go back and bring that character up to speed again. And the platforming is very stiff. It has that signature license game side-scroller jump. You know the one I'm talking about, where you can't make any of your jumps confidently and it feels like there are cinder blocks tied to your character's feet. And when you aren't doing that, you're doing also the trademark mind-numbing beat-em-up gameplay. If anything, I got to watch Artie burn in a pool of lava 1,000 times. That was fun. It's over, Boro. I have the high ground. You underestimate my waffle jump. Yeah!
Now dig on this.
Spider-Man! On the Spidey side of things, Spider-Man 2 the game was a launch title on PSP, and while it was interesting to see a 3D Spidey on a handheld, it shared nothing with the home console version. This port was rather linear and mediocre, and it just seemed like the PSP wasn't ready yet to handle an open world experience. And when the Spider-Man 3 game came out, Xbox and PS3 versions were developed, but also came the PS2 and Wii versions, which were dealing with 6th gen level hardware.
Hey, yo, whoa, hold on there, Mike. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Drop the shoe and discover the power of being Spider-Man. Lights down for mood, and get swinging.
Many consider these ports to be inferior and underwhelming, but because of them, they managed to finally get a true open world Spidey game on the PSP. I know I say this a lot, but come on, this is impressive, this is cool. Having an open world superhero game on the go like this was a pretty big deal. It turns what's a very average console game into a really astonishing handheld game. The web physics are all intact, the combat and level design is the same, the butt-ugly ass cutscenes are all here where everybody looks like the afterbirth of a General Car Insurance commercial. Graphically, this game was rather atrocious on PS2, but on PSP, with this open world setting, it's more forgivable.
Please, get these chains off.
Sadly, folks, the I'm going to die cutscene isn't in the PSP version.
You're a true hero, Spider-Man.
The animations in action look pretty fluid and nice. You can twirl gracefully in the air or swing at full speed and make Mary Jane's bones rattle.
I'm gonna get sick.
Me and Mary Jane are gonna have a hell of a time together.
Seeing as the PSP is missing a lot of inputs compared to the DualShock, largely triggers and a second analog stick, to control the camera you use the left shoulder button. At first this can seem like a nuisance or playing with a handicap, but it actually works decently well. If you're gonna check out this iteration of Spider-Man 3, I say what the hell, just go with the PSP version for the handheld novelty. The DS version of Spider-Man 3, much like Shrek the Third, is 2.5D and pretty much everything is done with a touchscreen. Everything, the web swinging, your attacks, it's all exhausting on my hands. But I think you gotta give this control scheme a bit of credit. You see, there was just no way the DS was going to be able to replicate an open world action game like the PSP version. But with these touchscreen mechanics, you do get more control of your web swings and combos, like drawing circles with a stylus to spin an enemy around in mid-air. And the combat itself feels very punchy too. You can do combos with variations of swipes on the stylus. It's a pretty decent 2.5D beat 'em up. If you're not a fan of the DS touchscreen controls, it might be a pain, but I'd argue that gimmick is what really makes this game special. I had to capture the footage on an emulator.
We're gonna fight!
But when playing it with the actual touchscreen, it felt relatively slick. The combat just gets rather repetitive. Obviously, there is no open world, but you're free to roam location to location, and it adapts a lot of the narrative of the movie as well as the console version of the game. Yes, you will be fighting lizard people at the park. Remember in the movie when Peter Parker was like, "Mary Jane, how could you secretly be a lizard person this whole time at this beautiful park? You're gonna pay!" Now, if you want a straightforward, side-scrolling, Obi Trice, real name, no gimmicks, 2D beat 'em up, there's the Game Boy Advance version. Again, seeing this title screen is so surreal. What I love about the Game Boy Advance is that it always gives a glimpse at what a 16-bit adaptation of a game would have probably looked like. If Spider-Man 3 came out in the Sega Genesis days, I mean, this might be close to what it would have been. Spider-Man 3 GBA for a movie tie-in game from 2007 released this late in the console's life is pretty damn good. I was surprised how nice the combat and animations feel. The web swinging, while obviously limited, is simple and great. I just really like seeing these moments from the movie adapted here too. I find it fascinating. Like the other renditions, you'll be swinging around and giving enemies the Tobey Maguire Bukkake special before beating their ass. The black suit is here as a power-up. It makes your attacks more powerful and you'll be crawling along levels being the hero that Chad Kroeger always wanted you to be. Pixelated on a GBA screen. Honestly, it's pretty solid and nice and short. I'd say all three handheld renditions of Spider-Man 3 are all impressive in their own right. And it's cool that we got a trio of different versions of these games on the go, and they all ended up being pretty decent. Good job, Spidey.
Yo-ho, pirate games!
Pirates of the Caribbean video games kind of have this sporadic history, one that's mostly actually tied to handhelds, with the first Pirate of the Caribbean game being exclusive to the Game Boy Advance. Even Dead Man's Chest video game tie-ins were only available on PSP, DS, and GBA. In fact, it wasn't until At World's End that the series finally had a game released on multiple home consoles and handhelds at the same time. Sadly, in order for this beast of the sea to cough up these ports, a Game Boy Advance version of At World's End had to be sacrificed. As on handhelds, we only got a PSP and DS version. I'm so sorry, Rodrigo. Now, faithful viewer, if you ever wondered what a Pirates of the Caribbean game adaptation of Dead Man's Chest and At World's End would have looked like on the PlayStation 1, look no further.
If you were to stab his heart, you will take his place and control the Flying Dutchman.
And yes, At World's End the game actually abridges the second and third movie together, which I'm pretty glad they did because Dead Man's Chest acts as a great tutorial to all the mechanics until you get to the juicy Threequel bits. I'm not gonna lie, even the pacing here is a little better than the movie sometimes because of it. On PSP, At World's End starts with Jack Sparrow in prison before shortly being freed by a mysterious stranger, where you swashbuckle your way out and talk to strange-sounding NPCs.
Thank you kindly.
It's literally Dark Souls!
Like myself, Jack Sparrow carries bombs, throwing knives, and a whole-ass rotisserie chicken in his pocket at all times. You also get this pistol, which you can use mid-combat between your sword attacks.
It's a lot like Bloodborne, fellow gamer.
The combat here, while simple, is at least more varied and engaging than something like Shrek the Third. You can block and parry attacks, and if you sidestep, enemies will knock into each other or fall off the level. It's pretty damn neat when it happens. I'm easily impressed, okay? Like, one time this dude got knocked into the wall of the Dutchman, revealing a secret area. Using your items and sidestepping will also sometimes lead to environmental kills and stuff like that. It's cool little things like these that make some of the more repetitive stuff a little more forgiving. You also have these things called jackanisms, which is just a cute way to say here's some goofy QuickTime events where instead of ripping out an eyeball, you go the Jack Sparrow route and sneak and saunter around and cause pirate shenanigans. It's a cheap but effective way of capturing some of the more whimsical parts of the movies. Most of the levels are very straightforward and linear. Occasionally you'll make port where the levels will open up just a teensy bit to let you talk to NPCs and do side missions. Like this one where this lady asks you to go find her husband and eventually you find him shacking up with this harlot. And if you accept, he'll pay you to keep quiet. Scandal! That's why my only love be the sea. Hey baby, you wanna go somewhere more quiet and split a whole ass rotisserie chicken? Hey baby, is it me or do I got a $5 Costco whole chicken in my pocket? Hey baby, how about we go split up? Can I interest you in a whole chicken? In this game, you'll be playing mostly as Jack, Barbossa, Will, Artie. Nah, I'm just kidding. You play as PS1 Keira Knightley, which is just... oof. As the crew fled the destruction of the Black Pearl under the wrath of Davy Jones' Kraken, Will Turner was aghast to look back and see not the sight of the horrifying Lovecraftian creature before him, but to see his dear beloved PS1 Elizabeth kissing PS1 Jack Sparrow. I'm gonna be sick. For a movie title game pumped out like this, I think between the set pieces and the combat, there is some fun to be had here, especially if you're a fan of the movies. They did manage to capture certain aspects of the spirit of the films, but the big disappointment though is there's not much else to this game beyond what you're seeing. Like there's no naval battles or anything like that, it's straight up just this combat. Even when I got to a level called Sea Battle, it was still just sword fighting and killing enemies with their knives and their bombs and their guns. Zombie, rotisserie chickens. Okay, you do get these boss battle one-on-one sword fight things, but these suck. Yeah, it's funny to watch these marionettes of PS1 looking people sword fight each other, but you can't do any of your combos, use your attack items, nothing. You can block and sword fight until the clock runs out and that's it, it's kind of boring. And there really isn't much else to mix things up here, and if it is, it's rare. I think At World's End is a decent enough distraction if you're a fan of the series, but if you're looking for a more well-rounded pirate game on PSP, you might want to go with something like Sid Meier's Pirates. Now, if the PSP version of At World's End is a window into some alternate reality of a PS1 port, let's just say while playing the DS version of this game, I could faintly make out an N64 cartridge in the distance. This DS version is more of a side-scroller beat-em-up type game when it comes to the combat, and it uses a traditional control scheme. No constant swiping, instead the touchscreen controls are used more practically for things like hacking minigames and such. There's also more light puzzle solving and platforming elements here, and while they're very simple, I enjoyed this way more than the mind-numbing combat. In fact, I found myself largely skipping over many of these enemies just to get back to doing some shimmying, pole vaulting, and lighting torches up. Between each level, you do get to return back to the ship that acts as your central hub. There's not too much to do here, but you can admire all the treasure you find in the levels. Yeah, check it out. Look at my McNuggets and McApple Pie. One thing the DS version hands down does better than the PSP is the one-on-one boss battle duels. Rather than just mindless button mashing, you actually use the touchscreen controls for your sword fighting and you can block and parry attacks while trying to exploit openings. I actually found these parts a lot of fun, and it's ironic that the touchscreen heavy moments ended up being the most engaging part of the game for me. It just goes to show that DS's gimmicks can be used well with a little thought put into it, because really I don't think I would have been able to handle playing a third licensed DS game today that used a stylus for everything. And yes, I used an emulator for this footage, okay? You can sing the song.
Oh, we don't really care because we're pirates!
So there you have it, faithful viewer. With the Three Threequels of May 2007, we were given 8 handheld renditions. All for your playing pleasure. May we remember them, and thank you for joining me.